Welcome to Darien Library. My name is Erin Shea and I'm the head of adult programming here. I'd like to take a minute to thank the Friends of Darien Library for your generous contributions. Your annual fund is what funds our collections and programs and helps make them available to the community. So thank you for your generous donations. In this memoir that we are going to be hearing about tonight, our guest describes her quest to deal with a condition many of us know all too well, and that is anxiety. And tonight before the event, I was actually reading some Amazon customer reviews of her book, and someone called it Woody Allen meets the Dalai Lama, which I thought was really cute. Through clear and distinct prose that is at times hilariously self-deprecating, our author embarks on a journey through countless meditation practices to determine which is the right one for her. If you've ever suffered from anxiety, or maybe just want to bring a little more calm to your life, I do highly recommend this book, which is called Learning to Breathe. So please join me in welcoming to Darien Library, Miss Priscilla Warner.
Thank you so much. Wow, it works. It's great. I wrote another book with two other women, and we traveled around the country extensively on about a 3 or 4 year book tour. And it was very choreographed, as it had to be, because there were 3 of us. So I had this fantasy that when I went off on my own with this book, I would just do whatever I wanted to do, wherever I wanted to go. And this table sort of reflects that. You know, I've got my chocolate and my tea and my iPod with my playlist, and it kind of looks like my bed/desk at home. And I thought, you know, I'm going to lay out a carpet, a little prayer rug, and I'm going to sit cross-legged on the carpet, and I'm going to simulate this wonderful experience I had, sort of getting on my magic carpet ride coming with me. But we were a little late getting here tonight, and we got stuck in traffic, and I don't feel really comfortable sitting on the floor in front of all you people, but you have to kind of imagine me grounded, centered, meditating in a way that I never imagined that I could. If you had told me that I would be blogging for Psychology Today about how I overcame my panic attack, I wish someone had told the 15-year-old girl who had her first panic attack that this was how it was going to end up. And that this wonderful man who I've been married to for 30 plus years would be driving me here tonight, and our 2 wonderful sons would be healthy and happy and bringing us such joy. You know, if only we could look into the future, and if somebody could say to us, as somebody said to me today, you are wonderful just as you are. But then I wouldn't have had a book to write about. I wouldn't have had a life to write about. When I was 15 years old, I had my first panic attack, and it was a long time ago. There was no Oprah. Nobody in the world was mentioning panic attacks. Now they talk about them, you know, if you can't find your size at a sample sale, you have a panic attack. But I was working, I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and I was working at the Brown University cafeteria. I went to an all-girls school, and I was desperate to meet boys. So some friends and I signed up to be waitresses. And I was just dishing out peas to young men who were not noticing me. Thankfully, because all of a sudden, my throat closed up, my heart started pounding, I felt dizzy, my hands were tingling, and I couldn't catch my breath, and I was sure that I was dying. And if anybody had noticed me and had known what was going on in my head, I just felt like a complete freak. I just had no idea what was happening. I managed to call my parents. I got home, I curled up in their bed, and back then, doctors made house calls. So a very nice man named Mel Hoffman, very kind soul, came to my parents' house and took my vital signs, and he pronounced that I was just a little bit nervous. And he gave me a prescription for something called Librium, which back in the I guess this was 70s, was the drug of choice for sort of stoned out housewives, you know, just give them the drug, Milton, and they'll, whatever. So I took the drug for a few days, I remember, and then I remember just driving in my mother's car thinking, she was driving me, thinking, this isn't right, you know, I'm kind of stoned out, but I'm not, what happened to me? I had no idea. I started having these panic attacks, and they come out of the blue, and you have no idea what's causing them, and nobody is telling you that they've ever experienced one. So I discovered when I was a teenager that if I took a little bit of vodka and I just gulped it down, it would somebody's nodding in the audience, it would just stop, it would just like warm, there would be this warm glow that calmed me down. It would stop these lungs that were, galloping out of control from doing whatever it was that they were doing, which I was sure was going to kill me. So I used to, now it's all out in the open. My kids, I don't even know if they've read the book, thankfully, but they claim they have. Now they know that I carried this flask of vodka with me everywhere I went, and I would take a gulp of it, and it would just sort of slay the dragon that was inside me that I didn't know how to slay on my own. People back then didn't take things like SSRIs or antidepressants that would help this condition. I managed to build a life for myself. I came from a family where we had problems that a lot of families have, but sometimes they were spoken about, sometimes they weren't. And that caused a certain amount of anxiety. I mean, my father was manic depressive. His twin brother was in and out of mental hospitals all my life, and he was sort of my boogeyman. I was really scared of him. It was obvious, he had a terrible stutter. It was obvious that he suffered, and nobody ever really addressed it. He would just have what adults would say were nervous breakdowns, and he would be locked up in a mental hospital. And there's a scene in the book where I really do go back and recall exactly what it felt like, one of the saddest occasions when it happened. And my namesake is a woman who, I don't know if she's alive or not, but my father's favorite husband, who was a schizophrenic woman. And last time I knew she was homeless, she used to send me letters from all over the country. So in addition to having this nervous system that erupted without me understanding why, I had people around me who looked like they were suffering and also didn't know why, and they were not seeming to get any better. When I went off to college, I had great friends. I was always able to function in school, and I went off to college, and it got really severe. And I have a lot of young people who write to me now, and a lot of difficulties arise when they separate for the first time and they go off to college. It definitely happened to me. But a lot of the people who I've met since I've written this book are very high achievers, because anxiety can fuel a lot of wonderful performances. And it's a great distraction to work like crazy, because then your body has something to do with all of this nervous energy it's producing. So I picked a profession that was perfect, which was advertising. I would have to stay late and work on these intense presentations, and then give them, and my adrenaline would be running, and I would be literally in the conference room thinking, okay, should I take a Valium now? Should I go to the bathroom and take a, but I was functioning. Nobody knew that any of this was going on. Flash forward, I met my husband in a bar in Boston. It was love at first sight. He said, would you like to move to New York? And I said, oh, I never want to live in New York. I feel sorry for people who have to live there. And then 6 months later, I packed my bags, left this great apartment that I thought was wonderful. He thought it was less wonderful. And moved to New York without a job, had to figure out my way through that. We have two terrific boys. My first pregnancy, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and he died 2 days before our son's second birthday. So a lot of my son's early life was filled up with a kind of an anxiety that I tried to deal with, but a lot of sorrow and mixed with a great amount of joy. And my second pregnancy was basically one long panic attack. There was something about the hormones of pregnancy. There was a woman at the time, I said to her, oh my God, I'm not sleeping, I'm freaking out. This is weird. And she said, and I said, one person's panic attack is another person's fabulous tennis game. So everybody has a different calibration to their central nervous system. I wrote a bunch of children's books and a couple screenplays and novels that weren't published. And then one day I met these two women, and we set out to have this amazing adventure, which turned out to be a book called The Faith Club. We were all strangers to each other. We had this fantastic, honest, powerful interfaith dialogue, and then a book, and it took us all around the country. And everywhere we went, I would take a little Klonopin to fly, take a little Klonopin to speak publicly. I would try to do yoga, twist myself into a pretzel in hotel room so I could get up in front of 1,000 people in Oklahoma City and pretend that I was calm. And in the back of my mind, I was talking to all of these religious people and people of all faiths who practice their religion in all kinds of ways, and it was a wonderful privilege. But in the back of my mind, I was starting to think, I don't know, like, tell me anything. And as long as you don't hold me to, your standards and force me to believe what you believe, but all of these paths seem to be leading to wonderful places. And I read a wonderful quote that said, the longer I'm on a path, the less of a path there is. And that's what I began to feel with the Faith Club. So I'd heard about mystics, and I knew that, they went to other realms, and they, thought about things that I wanted to think about, and they looked for answers to questions that had been haunting me. And I'd also been hearing about these Tibetan monks who meditated so effectively that neuroscientists were studying their brains. They were giving them MRIs. Particularly, there were two places, one at the University of Wisconsin. Someone named Richard Davidson does a lot of work with these Tibetan monks, and they study people in deep states of contemplation and meditation. And I opened up a magazine in Tulsa, Oklahoma on the tarmac after a long leg of a book tour, and I saw these monks again, and I thought, that's it, it's a sign. I want the brain of a monk, and I want everything that goes along with that brain, like peace and tranquility and loving kindness. I didn't know what that was, but I'd heard the word, and compassion, which I knew the Dalai Lama talked about, but I didn't quite know what that was. And I'm gonna stop this book tour by writing another book. So I flew home and I wrote a book proposal, and I said I want to change my brain from a neurotic Jew to a serene Tibetan monk. And this is how I'm going to get there. And my agent said, okay, that sounds good. And I Googled and I found all these people, and I decided, I did an outline, and then I sold the book, and then I had to do it. So my first retreat was with a man I've been fascinated with named Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, who's a young Tibetan monk who is now unavailable. He's on a 3-year silent retreat in the Himalayas by himself somewhere. But when I Googled him, he was teaching a retreat on the day after my birthday for 5 days up in Garrison, New York, at this beautiful old monastery. So I said, great, I'm going to learn how to meditate. This is my idea. I'm going to meditate my way from panic to peace. And I'm going to do all these other treatments and meet these healers, and I'm going to get to this place like that. It's going to happen so quickly. So I got there in the first retreat, and I brought the Klonopin, but that's kind of all I brought. Everybody else had the special cushions, and they had the shawls, and they had these little books where everybody was writing